Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. On this week's episode of the 302, we continue our conversation on COVID-19. Our focus being mental health, giving you tips and tools you can use to get through the crisis. Stay tuned for a very special edition of the 302. Hey 302, we are going through a really tough time right now. Most of us are stuck at home. Some of us are working. Some of us are without a job. And stress and anxiety is at an all-time high. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and things that you can do to try to get through this. I'm joined by Jennifer So with the Mental Health Association in Delaware to talk about it. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, for somebody who may not be familiar with Mental Health Association in Delaware, tell us a little bit about your mission.
Sure. So we are a statewide nonprofit that's focused on improving the mental well-being of individuals and families in Delaware through education, support, and advocacy. So that's our mission. We actually started in 1932. And back then, just a fun fact, we were called the Delaware State Society for Mental Hygiene. We changed our name in 1951. And since then, we've had some changes in programming, some of the objectives, even our understanding of mental illness has increased tremendously since the inception of our organization. And even the terminology that we use around mental health and behavioral health has changed for the better to reduce stigma. But our core focus of education, support, and advocacy has always remained the same.
So when you talk about education, support, and advocacy, what exactly do you guys do?
I'm so glad you asked. A lot of times we get confused with direct services or treatment providers because of our name. Unfortunately, we don't have clinicians on staff. We don't provide direct care. But what our focus and our aim is we want to provide a spectrum of outreach activities so that we can encourage, equip, and empower our Delaware citizens to increase their awareness and understanding of mental illness, and then also get help for themselves if they need it, whether it's for themselves or for their loved ones or others. And so, again, we focus on those three mission areas of education, advocacy, and support, and we provide outreach services around those areas.
So let's talk a little bit about what's happening. This is just unprecedented, the level of stress and anxiety that we're seeing naturally because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing and what folks in your industry are saying.
Sure. So as the number of COVID-19 cases are increasing, we're also seeing increase in anxiety that's associated with that. And for the general public, the mental health effects of the coronavirus are just as important to address as the physical health effects of this virus. According to National Mental Health America, which we're actually an affiliate of, they have screening data which shows that there was a 19% increase in screening for clinical anxiety in the first weeks of February, and then another 12% increase in the first 2 weeks of March. So we're seeing that this virus is having a severe impact on individuals and on folks. And while this, may be a natural response, worrying and stress during times like this is a normal emotional response, we also have to know when those normal emotions are starting to become actually clinical anxiety. And so a first way of identifying, hey, do I have anxiety or not, is taking a screening. And actually, Mental Health America offers a free screening tool that's available 24 hours a day. It's confidential, it's anonymous, and it's just a starting piece. And you can actually go to www.mhascreening.org to take a free screening tool.
So can you walk me through when I go and I do this online, what kinds of questions is it going to ask me? Is it confidential? You said it was confidential, right?
Yes, it's confidential. And I think it's a good starting point. So it's not necessarily like you can get a diagnosis from that screening. You always want to take the screening and then take it to a professional to get a follow up, but it's just a great starting tool. And there's questions that kind of revolve around, again, your mood mainly, but there's questions related to depression, there's questions related to anxiety, bipolar disorder, even schizophrenia. And so you can kind of do a screening on those different mental illnesses. And again, it's just a great starting point just to figure out, is this something that I am struggling with? And then maybe taking that screening result to a healthcare professional to have a further discussion and dialogue on some of the things that you're concerned about.
Now, are you seeing increased numbers on the screening tool that you have online? Are more people using it?
That I'm not 100% sure because it's not our screening tool. It's through Mental Health America. And I was reading on their post that they've collected screening data and they've seen an increase in anxiety. Um, I'm not sure if more folks going on to take the screening or if it's just kind of normal baseline, but they're just seeing a lot more cases of anxiety pop up. It could be a combination of both. And especially now that a lot of us are working remotely from home, or maybe we have a little bit more time, maybe people are more apt to go online, do a little bit of research, take the screening. I think a lot of times we defer things because, we don't have enough time. I have to work. I have to take care of my kids. But now that, maybe some of us have a little bit more time since we're working from home and commute is down, they may have the time to take these screening tools. And so, again, if this is something that you're thinking about struggling with, I highly recommend taking a screening tool. And it won't hurt, and like I said, it is anonymous, it's free, it's confidential. And if there are certain things that you're concerned about based on the screening results, talk to your healthcare provider about that. It could be even your PCP. I think your general family care provider is a great first point to talk about these things.
So can you give me the web address to that one more time?
Yeah, sure. It's www.mhascreening.org.
We are talking about mental health in Delaware, everywhere for that matter. And we're speaking with Jennifer So with the Mental Health Association in Delaware. We're going to be right back.
Hi, my name is Bob, and I'm the Artistic Director at the Candlelight Theater, and we are center stage on the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about mental health in Delaware. We're joined by Jennifer So. She's with the Mental Health Association in Delaware. Now, Jennifer, we were talking about the screening tool being a starting point for folks, but let's talk more about the level of anxiety. How do you know when it's time to reach out, and how is COVID-19 just really drilling down on people right now?
Right. As I mentioned before, I think worry and stress and anxiety are all a normal part of life, right? I don't think there's anyone that hasn't experienced those feelings and those emotions. But what starts impacting your daily life? For example, you can't concentrate at work because you're so anxious. You can't have meaningful relationships with your family, with your friends, with your loved ones because you're constantly having these anxious thoughts. It's preventing you from doing the hobbies and things that you once enjoyed. Even simple things like hygiene are starting to go down the wayside because you're so anxious, or maybe you're having bouts of depression. And if this is persistent, 2 weeks or longer, definitely an indicator that, hey, this might be more than just, the normal ups and downs of life, or feeling anxious, or feeling worried and stressed. And, that may be a point where maybe not even just taking a screening, but even talking to your healthcare provider about, some of these concerns, some of these feelings that you're having with, again, your healthcare provider.
Yeah, so it's not just for a lot of us, we're confined at home where we have our kids and everything. So, and they factor into it as well. I mean, how do we know if our children are super stressed out? Maybe they need some help because they don't understand, or they're afraid by what they're seeing on the news. So, how do kids factor in on all this?
Yeah. So, I think the tough part is, parents who have young ones. And this whole working from home, may be great for some folks. But I think it's especially if you have little ones and, at the moment, because kids aren't going to school and it's virtual learning, parents have to be flexible. I think it's important to talk about the coronavirus with your kids, obviously in a different language, in a way that they will understand. Um, their anxiety, but it's also important to have a routine, and I think kids, and not just even kids, adults too, we thrive on routine, right? And so it's important to, even in this chaos, even in this mayhem, to form some type of routine to cope with the stresses of COVID-19, to maintain some sanity, so that, your kids are healthy, you're healthy. And again, that open dialogue, I think, is really important, not just about the coronavirus, but about mental health. And I think mental health, that dialogue, that education starts at an early age. Just because we don't talk about it with our kids doesn't mean that they're not experiencing some of these feelings. And it doesn't mean that they don't know either, especially because we live in a day and age where information is so easily available to us. And so even if we're not, talking about these things with our kids, they may already know about it. And so it is important to maintain family communication around these topics.
Now, I know that in every family, there's one person who's kind of like, they drive the bus. You know what I'm saying? They make sure that the family gets where they need to go. And they're kind of like the watchdogs for if somebody's sick or if something's going on. We talked about kids and adults as well, but and just that feeling of anxiety. But can anxiety and stress manifest in other ways? And how can we cope with that? What are some coping mechanisms?
Anxiety can actually manifest in very physical ways. Maybe you have some gastrointestinal issues. For some, they may experience panic attacks with their anxiety. And panic attacks literally feel like a heart attack for some folks. And so sometimes people get confused, especially if they've never had a panic attack before, and they think they're having a heart attack. They'll go to the emergency room, testing will be done. Oh, nothing's wrong with your heart. It seems like everything's okay. You didn't have a heart attack. But, it feels like one. And so there are a lot of physical manifestations. And I think especially with young kids who don't understand, that you can experience these anxious feelings in physical ways, I think it's really important, to have that open dialogue around anxiety, what that could look like. Not to say that everyone who has anxiety is going to experience gastrointestinal issues or have muscle aches or can't sleep. But, these are some of the physical symptoms, and also talking about those psychological and emotional symptoms attached to anxiety as well.
So coping mechanism, we hear a lot about like meditation and you mentioned talking to a professional. Are there other things that maybe we can do to kind of help us, deal with, okay, this is temporary, this is temporary, this is temporary?
One thing I wanted to mention is maybe creating a wellness plan. Some of you may have it already, some of you may not. And I think regardless of if you have a mental illness or not, having some type of wellness plan in place will be helpful in the future in case you do need it. And just by starting off by asking the question, what can I do when I get anxious? Who are the people that I can talk to when I get down this negative pathway? What are some healthy distractions that will prevent me from getting into this negative space? And then jotting those things down, whether it's resources, people you can call, things that you can easily do. And I think it's really important to have a visual representation. So whether it's jotting it down physically on a notebook with pen and paper, or, doing it on your phone, because I think when you're in that moment of crisis, and maybe not even a full-blown crisis, but maybe you're just feeling really anxious or you're having a bout of depression, it's hard to come up with those positive coping skills. It's hard to think about those things right on the spot.
All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. We're going to be right back. We're going to be talking more about mental health right after this.
My name is Elizabeth Lockman, and I'm the state senator for Delaware's 3rd State Senate District, and you're watching the 302. I love it.
Welcome back. We're talking about mental health tools you can use in the face of the COVID-19 crisis. I'm joined by Jennifer So with the Mental Health Association in Delaware. Jennifer, now we talked about keeping a routine and talking to people on the phone and also online. There are a bunch of online resources, like you could join a group and talk with other people who share the same situation and feelings. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So, one of the things that we focus on at our agency is support. And we do that by providing support groups, or what we call wellness groups, throughout the state of Delaware. Now, because of this pandemic, we've had to be creative and modify our approach a little bit. And so we've gone virtual with our support group meetings. And even if you don't have the video capability, you can actually just call in to participate in the meeting as well. And so we have support groups or wellness groups for depression and anxiety, and then also something called survivors of suicide, which is for individuals who have lost a loved one to suicide. And we have a schedule going on. So we have a Monday group that meets from 1 to 2 for depression and anxiety, another one on Thursday that meets from 9 to 10, for depression and anxiety, and then a Thursday evening one that's for the survivors of suicide group that meets at 7 p.m. And if you're interested, you can actually email our community educator, Rochelle Ballin. And her email is rbalan@mhande.org.
So when we're looking at all of these resources, I think the thing to tell folks is that, you're not alone and it's okay, because there's still a stigma. There's been a lot of work that's been done on asking for help if you have thoughts of self-harm, or that you need help. And I think we just need to get past that, right? I mean, how are we doing on that front?
So, as you mentioned, I think there is still stigma associated with mental health, and even, asking for help and suicide especially. But we have come a long way. I can't negate the fact that we've come a long way since, 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. But we still always have more work to do in terms of bringing down that stigma. And that's what our agency is really about. We want to have these honest conversations. We want to educate the public so that people don't have this associated stigma when it comes to mental health and asking for help. The one good thing I will say about our youth is that they have less stigma when it comes to having these conversations. And so our college students and high school students, they're more open about talking about their emotions and about mental health, which is such a great thing. And I commend our younger generation for that. But, of course, this is across all generations, right? It's not just impacting the younger generation. This impacts all, right? And so I think whether we're middle-aged, or older, I think we need to have these honest conversations. And the more we can dialogue about this, I think the more that we can connect with one another and resonate with one another and say, hey, you know what? I'm not having those thoughts, but it seems like there's other having these same experiences or feelings as I do. And it really brings down that stigma, and then it allows people to feel empowered to seek help.
Now, I know that's a very important point, that we are all in this together, all of us across the country and across the world for that matter, staying home and doing our best to stay healthy and doing what we can to try to be helpful in whatever way. Now, somebody who's watching this wants to check out all the stuff that you told us about. Where can they go to get hooked up?
Sure. So they can actually visit our website. It's www.mhande.org, or they can email us. We have a general email account. It's information@mhande.org. And we can communicate and provide more resources. There's a whole bunch of resources online. There's free meditation apps. There's free fitness classes. I think the YMCA's has gone virtual with free online classes. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of places are trying to do good and still provide resources for the community based on what we can safely provide and do. And so I really encourage you all, to not be discouraged, to keep hope, to keep looking out for information and resources. Reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns, and be kind to one another. I think, I wanted to end with that, but it's a tough time. And I think even before this pandemic, it's a tough world, right? And so I think if we can be kinder to one another, be uplifting, encouraging, and supportive, I think it'll go a long way. And so I really hope that during this time, we are truly kinder to folks, and that shines through.
And hopefully that we carry this with us whenever this is over, sooner rather than later for a lot of folks. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm sure our viewers in Delaware and elsewhere will be reaching out to get the resources they need.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversation.
We'll be right back. That'll do it for this special edition of the 302. We leave you now with the latest briefing from the state of Delaware. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Stay healthy in the 302.
We ordered a stay-at-home order for all Delawareans, again, with the purpose of protecting everyone. And our message all along has been that your actions affect your neighbor, and your neighbor's actions affect you. And our primary objective is to, if you've heard the scientists on the television talk about all the time, to flatten the curve. That means to reduce the spread of the virus here in our state, to protect everybody, but particularly to protect our most vulnerable populations, our elderly parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and friends. And so we closed the schools until the middle of May, on March the 23rd, and then on 29th, mostly because we were seeing a lot of people traveling to Delaware for various reasons, including because maybe some of the services were not available or were closed down in Pennsylvania or Maryland in particular. We ordered that out-of-state travelers needed to self-quarantine for 14 days if they traveled to Delaware, which obviously discourages people from doing that. And they can travel to Delaware to work in an essential business, to provide for an elderly parent or family member. And so we are working through different ways to enforce that provision, because we continue to see in various parts of our state people traveling across the border in a way that's not permitted by our state of emergency.